It was Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery. Could an old Marine's presence change everything? The president was there, 4-star generals, Gold Star families, the kind of ceremony where everything had to be perfect. So when an old Marine showed up in a faded jacket, holding nothing but a folded flag and 3 handwritten names, the guard stopped him. "Sir, this is a formal event, no invitation, no entry." No one asked who he was, no one even looked twice until the Medal of Honor recipient paused his speech, looked out into the crowd, and asked, "Is Sergeant Walter Briggs here today?" Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The air was still that morning. Soft gray clouds hung low over Arlington National Cemetery, casting a muted light over the endless rows of white headstones. Flags fluttered gently in the breeze, hundreds of them, each one placed with care. Every inch of the place whispered reverence. It was Memorial Day, and this year it was different. The President of the United States was scheduled to speak. 4-star generals, Medal of Honor recipients, Gold Star families, all invited, all accounted for. The kind of ceremony where everything was orchestrated to the minute, broadcast live, watched by millions. At the east entrance, security was tight. Metal detectors, facial recognition, QR codes scanned and re-scanned, dress uniforms and formal attire. Only Secret Service agents stationed every 20 feet, and just outside the checkpoint, standing alone in a sea of polished shoes and pressed lapels, was an old man in a faded green jacket. Walter Briggs, 83 years old, Marine Corps, retired, served in I Corps, Northern South Vietnam in 1969. He'd arrived by bus that morning from southern Maryland. No entourage, no fanfare. He wore his service uniform, what was left of it, olive green, slightly frayed at the cuffs. The insignia patch on his shoulder was barely legible. His shoes were polished but scuffed. On his head, a well-worn Marine ball cap, sun-bleached and softened by time. In his left hand, he held a small American flag folded tight the way only Marines know how to fold one, and in the other a piece of notebook paper, 3 names written in black ink carefully, neatly. His reason for coming: Walter had no plans to stay long. He hadn't come for the speeches, he didn't need the music or the 21-gun salute. He just wanted to walk to the Vietnam War Memorial Wall, lay the flag down, whisper their names, and go home. But now he was stuck at the gate. "Sir," the security officer said again, firmer this time, "this is a high-level event, access is restricted. I need to see your invitation." Walter shifted his weight slowly, reaching into the inside pocket of his jacket. He frowned, checked again. The envelope wasn't there. It had been that morning. He remembered placing it there with the map and the bus schedule. He checked the other pocket, then his back pants pocket. "Nothing, I must have dropped it," he said softly. "It was in a white envelope, had my name." The guard didn't blink. "I'm sorry, sir, if you don't have the invite or a digital code, I can't let you in." Walter nodded, not surprised, not angry, just tired. "It's all right," he said, "I'll wait out here for a while." The guard hesitated, then turned back to his post. Walter stepped off to the side under a sycamore tree near the outer fence. He didn't sit down, he just stood quietly watching his guests file through the gate. Men in suits, women in formal black dresses, generals, staffers, cameramen, all scanned, cleared, and ushered inside. No one noticed him, no one asked his name, no one saw the folded flag in his hand or the names on that paper. Just another old man who forgot his pass. A junior soldier, maybe mid-20s, stood nearby in full dress blues. He'd been assigned to support the outer checkpoint, mostly crowd control. He glanced over at Walter, puzzled. The man looked out of place, but also somehow exactly right. That uniform, though faded, had been worn with care. The hat was positioned perfectly, the boots laced tight. He approached slowly. "Sir, you okay?" Walter nodded. "Yes, son, just misplaced my invitation." "You here for the ceremony?" "No," Walter said, "not really, I came for them." He held up the piece of paper, 3 names, handwritten. One of them had a small check mark next to it. The young soldier squinted to friends. Walter looked at the paper for a long moment. Family, could this quiet resolve rewrite the day? Back at the gate, a more senior security officer stepped over. "This gentleman still doesn't have credentials?" he asked. "No, sir," the younger one replied quietly. The senior officer turned to Walter. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the perimeter zone. You're not on the manifest." Walter didn't move, he didn't argue. "I understand," he said, but he stayed just 2 steps back under the tree holding the flag. Inside the cemetery, preparations continued. Rows of chairs were arranged facing a large stage flanked by giant LED screens. The presidential seal was affixed to the podium. Military bands tuned their instruments, cameramen ran final mic checks, and somewhere near the front row, retired Colonel Gabriel Knox straightened the medals on his jacket. He was the keynote speaker this year, Medal of Honor recipient, decorated, admired, a survivor of one of the most brutal ambushes during the war in Vietnam. He'd spent weeks writing his speech, practiced it in front of mirrors and aides, the story of how he was rescued, pulled from a burning trench, unconscious and bleeding by a man he never saw again, a man who never stepped forward to claim credit, a man who simply vanished. And today, Memorial Day, Knox planned to say thank you even if no one else remembered. He would outside the gate. Walter glanced down at his watch. 8:42 a.m. The ceremony would begin soon. He didn't try again, didn't push, he simply adjusted his hat, folded the piece of paper, and closed his eyes. A soft breeze stirred the grass around his feet, and for a brief moment, in the middle of all that formality, all that protocol, an old Marine stood still, remembering the names that never made it home. The wind picked up as the first chords from the military band echoed faintly across the hill. Inside the gates, chairs were filling, the press had arrived, C-SPAN cameras were live, staffers whispered into earpieces, adjusting lines of guests, shuffling protocol folders. Outside the gate, under that same sycamore tree, Walter Briggs remained exactly where he was. He hadn't moved, still holding the flag in one hand, still holding the folded piece of notebook paper in the other. The younger soldier, Private First Class Adam Ruiz, had returned to his post, but he kept glancing back toward the old man. There was something about him. It wasn't just the jacket or the fact that he hadn't raised his voice once, it was the way he stood, straight, steady, as if his boots were still planted on duty. Ruiz found himself stepping away again, just a few paces, not protocol, but his gut told him it was worth it. Sir, he said gently, approaching Walter once more. Walter turned slowly. Yes, son, do you mind if I ask what unit you served with? Walter paused, then gave a small smile. 3rd Marine Division, 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, Vietnam. 69. Ruiz blinked. That was real, no hesitation, no bragging, just a fact. I heard that was brutal. Walter didn't nod, didn't deny it. It was, he said, especially Quan Tri Tet offensive had just rolled through the jungle. Didn't forget. Ruiz looked down at the paper in Walter's hand. The names were still there. Were they yours? He asked. Walter glanced at the names, his voice softened. Corporal Daniels, Lance Corporal Reyes, Lieutenant Morgan, all three were with me that morning. Operation Apache Snow. A silence settled between them. Ruiz didn't speak, he just listened. I was supposed to be rear security, Walter continued. The rest of the unit had pushed through a thick line near Hill 937. Ambush hit mortars one by one. The radios went silent. He didn't blink, just stared ahead. I doubled back, found all three of them pinned under brush and blood. Morgan was still conscious, barely. He kept telling me to leave them. And did you? Ruiz asked. Walter finally looked at him. I carried them out one by one. A long breath. Only one made it. Ruiz's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say. And that one? He asked finally. Walter hesitated. He made it home, got married, had kids. He paused again. Last I heard, he joined the army, went officer, stayed in for life. Ruiz tilted his head. That wouldn't be Colonel Gabriel Knox, would it? Walter furrowed his brow. Knox? Yeah. Ruiz nodded. He's today's keynote speaker, Medal of Honor, fall of 69. I read his bio this morning. He was a young lieutenant then, said he owed his life to a man he never got to thank. Walter didn't react at first, then something changed behind his eyes, not surprise, more like something clicking into place. I didn't know that, he said. You didn't know he was here? Walter shook his head. I didn't come for him. Could this reunion rewrite their fates? Ruiz looked down at the names again. No, he said softly. You came for them. Walter gave a quiet nod. I'm not here to be seen, he said. I just didn't want them to be forgotten. Back at the security gate, the senior officer from earlier was watching them. He didn't like it. He walked over, stepping between them. Private, is there a reason you're away from post? Apologies, sir. Ruiz straightened quickly. Just checking on the civilian. The officer turned to Walter. Sir, we've already explained, without your physical invitation or a code on record, you can't be allowed inside the perimeter. I understand, Walter said calmly. No exceptions, not even for veterans. Walter nodded again. I'm not asking for one, but Ruiz shifted slightly. There was something in him, uncertainty, maybe defiance. Sir, he said to his superior cautiously, he's a Marine, served with the 1st of the 9th Operation Apache Snow. He says he pulled 3 men out, one of them might have been Colonel Knox. The officer rolled his eyes. Lots of stories like that. If every old-timer who claimed he saved a general got in. But Ruiz pressed quietly, he's not asking to be in the front row, sir. He just wanted to leave a flag, that's all. The officer sighed. You have a job. Private, get back to it. Ruiz gave Walter one last look, apology in his eyes, and returned to the gate. Walter remained still, hands steady, eyes fixed ahead. The band inside began playing America the Beautiful, and somewhere, not far beyond the gates, the first speech was beginning. Across the cemetery, in the staging tent behind the main stage, Colonel Gabriel Knox checked the notes in his folder. The speech was familiar by now. Polished, emotional in the right places. He'd read it a dozen times in the mirror, but something in him felt unsettled. He looked out toward the crowd from behind the curtain, rows of chairs, Gold Star families, the president's motorcade arriving, and then just beyond the checkpoint under a sycamore tree, he saw a man standing alone, not a guest, not a reporter, an old Marine, hat tilted just right, flag in his hand. Even from a distance, Knox knew. He didn't know how, but he knew that was him. The breeze moved gently across Arlington's rolling green, but inside the ceremonial canopy, everything was still. Rows of white chairs stretched toward the stage. Gold Star family sat front and center, Flanked by decorated officers and members of Congress, the President and First Lady had taken their seats minutes earlier. Uniformed musicians rested their hands on instruments, television crews' focus lenses, red lights blinked silently on every major news camera. Then came the voice over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome retired United States Army Colonel, Medal of Honor recipient Gabriel Knox. Applause broke out. Restrained and reverent, Colonel Knox stepped onto the stage even in full dress uniform. He moved with the gait of a man who had known pain as scar tissue in time pressing against every joint. He paused for a moment as he reached the podium, letting the silence settle. Then, without looking at his notes, he began. Today we honor the names we carry in silence. Some are etched in stone, others only live in memory, but all of them, every single one, gave us the gift of return. He scanned the audience slowly. I've had the privilege of speaking at many ceremonies, but this one is personal because 54 years ago, I lay bleeding in the jungle, surrounded by the dead. I thought I'd become one of them. The tent was quiet now, not even a cough. The air was thick with smoke. The radio had gone out. My sidearm was empty, and then out of nowhere, someone dragged me out. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions. He carried me, then disappeared. I never saw him again. He paused, blinked once. I never got to say thank you. Somewhere in the front row, a woman pressed a tissue to her eyes. I spent years wondering who he was. I searched records, filed requests, but he never stepped forward, never claimed a thing. Knox leaned forward slightly until this morning, there was a shift in the room, subtle, like breath being held. Knox looked past the crowd, past the cameras, out toward the trees. Is Walter Briggs here? Murmurs, heads turned, behind the stage. An aide quickly approached from the wings, whispering into his ear. Knox nodded slowly as he listened, then stepped back from the podium and laid the microphone down. No music played, no one moved. He descended the steps from the stage, every eye following. He walked past the front row, past the Medal of Honor recipients, past the President and First Lady. He crossed the velvet ropes, moving steadily through the central aisle and then beyond the final checkpoint out toward the edge of the security cordon where an old man stood quietly under a sycamore tree, still holding a folded flag, still waiting. Could this moment heal a decades-old debt? Walter had been watching from the shade. He hadn't heard the speech, couldn't hear much from where he stood, but he saw the figure leaving the stage. And as the man drew closer, walking directly toward him with slow, deliberate steps, Walter recognized him. The jawline, that limp, and those eyes, they hadn't changed. Gabriel Knox stopped 3 feet in front of him. For a moment, neither said a word. Then Knox removed his white gloves, pressed his heels together, and raised his hand in a perfect crisp salute, not out of formality, but out of something deeper: recognition, honor, debt. Walter hesitated just for a breath, then returned the salute. The cameras found them, but no one spoke because everyone watching knew they were witnessing something no program could script. Knox stepped closer. I thought you died, he said quietly. Walter gave a faint smile. Not yet. Knox's voice broke slightly. I looked for you. I never forgot your face. I never wanted to be found, Walter replied. I didn't do it to be remembered. Knox nodded. I know. He turned back toward the crowd, still watching in the stunned silence, and together, the two men walked side by side down the long green path back toward the stage. As they reached the podium again, Knox didn't hesitate. He stepped up, this time with Walter standing behind him. He looked out at the crowd, at the president, the officers, the families, and the nation, and he spoke. I'm sorry I stepped away from the microphone, but I needed to because the man standing behind me is the reason I'm alive. A hush fell over the audience. He saved my life in Vietnam, carried me through fire, never asked for thanks, never told his story, and today he wasn't allowed inside the ceremony because his uniform is old, because he lost his invitation. Knox's voice grew firmer. If he doesn't belong in this ceremony, then I have no business speaking at all. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was reverent, thick with something that no anthem could carry. Then from the front row, a single pair of hands began to clap, slow, firm, and then another and another until the entire assembly rose to their feet and applauded, not for the speech, not for the flag, but for the man who'd never asked to be seen, and was finally seen by all. When the applause faded, no one sat down right away. It wasn't out of confusion, it was out of respect. Even after Colonel Knox stepped away from the microphone and gently guided Walter toward the stage, the crowd remained standing. Some wiped their eyes, some held hands over hearts, others simply stood still, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Walter didn't speak, he didn't need to, he just nodded politely to each person they passed. A general here, a cabinet secretary there, Gold Star mothers, and Medal of Honor recipients, all giving him space like you would for a man returning from a different time. Knox led him to a chair in the front row just left of center beside a family whose eldest son had been killed in Iraq. The mother offered her hand. Walter took it gently. She didn't say anything either, only squeezed. The program resumed. The choir sang softly. A Navy chaplain read names etched into a new plaque, and at exactly 11 a.m., taps played. That moment, bugle against breeze. One old Marine seated beside strangers who suddenly felt like family, felt like a full circle quietly closed. Walter didn't cry, but when he folded the flag across his lap, His hands lingered there a little longer than before. He didn't come for the recognition, but somehow it had found him anyway. Could this recognition carry their legacy forward? After the ceremony, people scattered slowly, families gathered near the memorial wall, journalists gathered near the stage, security teams moved in waves, escorting public officials back to waiting motorcades. And Walter, he stood beside a garden bench at the edge of the field, adjusting the creases on his coat. He didn't know he'd become the story, but the cameras did. 3 crews approached, one from a national news outlet, another from a local channel, the third a veteran nonprofit trying to capture legacy interviews. They all asked the same thing, "Mr. Briggs, would you mind sharing what it felt like being honored today?" Walter looked up at them for a moment and then down at the folded flag in his hands. "I think," he said, voice steady but low, "some things don't need to be explained." He paused, gave a small nod. "They just need to be remembered." That was all he said, and that was all they recorded. Private First Class Adam Ruiz was still on post when Walter came walking back toward the gate. The crowd had thinned, the Secret Service had pulled back, but Ruiz hadn't left. Walter stopped a few feet from him. "Sir," Ruiz said, straightening. "Thank you," Walter replied. Ruiz looked surprised. For what? Walter offered a half smile, for not looking away. They shook hands, firm grip, no extra words. Then Walter stepped beyond the last barrier and walked slowly down the sidewalk toward the outer bus lot. No escort, no press, just the quiet sound of boots on pavement. 1 year later, the exhibit was small, just one corner of a glass case in the far eastern hall of the Arlington National Cemetery Museum, tucked between the Medal of Honor display and the Korean War remembrance. It didn't have a spotlight, no voiceover, no touchscreen display, but if you stood close enough, you'd see a folded olive green field jacket, the fabric faded around the elbows, the collar slightly torn, the shoulder patch still intact. 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, and beside it, under clean glass, lay a triangularly folded American flag at its base, on a brass placard worn by Sergeant Walter Briggs. Memorial Day, 2025, Arlington National Cemetery, the man whose silence reminded a nation how to remember. Visitors didn't linger long at that case, but those who did, they stayed still, they leaned in, and somewhere deep in the quiet space between history and honor, they understood something that couldn't be narrated. That summer, Private First Class Adam Ruiz received orders for deployment. On his last day in Washington before shipping out, he visited Arlington one last time. He stood alone in front of the display case, staring at the jacket. He remembered that day, the way Walter didn't raise his voice, the way he held that flag like it was still warm, the way Colonel Knox had broken protocol just to salute one man. Ruiz read the placard again, then stepped back and gave a quiet, perfect salute. There was no one around to see it, and that was exactly right. As for Walter Briggs, he didn't return to Arlington again, but every Memorial Day after that, a single envelope would arrive at Colonel Knox's office. No return address, no note inside, just a folded piece of paper with the same 3 names and a check mark next to each one. Still remembered, still carried, still home. Could this quiet tribute endure? In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.